Good
morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Henson. I work as a Tribal Student Achievement Specialist at the Office of Public Instruction. And as we start a new calendar year, as we start 2025, we're going to do things a little bit differently for the morning greetings for this week. We're going to share some perspectives from various tribes across the state of Montana and how they perceive the start of a new year. And this is a great reminder of Essential Understanding 1 in the Essential Understandings of Montana Indians. And I'll read this. Essential Understanding says, there is great diversity among the 12 sovereign tribes of Montana in their languages, cultures, histories, and governments. Each tribe has a distinct and unique cultural heritage that contributes to modern Montana. We also see reference to Essential Understanding number 3, which talks about the traditional beliefs and spirituality and how those persist today. So in today's greeting and in the greeting we'll share at the end of the week, you'll hear some various perspectives on the way different tribes across the state of Montana observe a new year.
Well, Hamitaki. Hello, my relatives. Mike Jetty, member of the Spirit Lake Dakota Nation and a Turtle Mountain Anishinaabeg descendant. And I currently work here as an Indian Ed for All specialist with OPI. And just want to share a few thoughts on the new year and what that means from an Indigenous perspective. And in my case, a Dakota, Lakota cultural perspective on what I've been taught. So in a traditional sense, the new year would start actually during the summertime around summer solstice after we have our, a Sundance ceremony or some other kind of ceremony like that, where we bring people together, you pray and celebrate, fast for 4 days. And then after that ceremony concludes, that's kind of when the new year starts then. And so like where I go, we have a round dance after the ceremony's done, and everybody will go around and wish everybody else Happy New Year. So another new year will start for that ceremonial cycle. So that's one way I've been taught about, New Year ceremonies happening from a Dakota, Lakota cultural perspective is in the summertime, kind of around summer solstice. But we still do New Year's Eve celebrations too. Like back on the Cheyenne River Reservation where I used to work, they have a New Year's Eve powwow. And, we still celebrate both. And why not? So, so we can still have our traditional New Year's, but then we go with, the standard, Gregorian calendar, whatever you want to call it, New Year's celebration on January 1st. So that's just a little bit insight into, I guess the cultural traditions I was brought up with and experienced today.
Nakoda, Matt Bell, Magyarbi. My name's Matt Bell. I'm Nakoda and Aani from Fort Belknap. And similar to what Mike was saying, I've been kind of mostly brought up to learn about Nakoda ways, which are very related to Lakota and Dakota. And we do mark the Sundance as very significant in our cyclical understanding of events. But I guess I would also add that we also, recognize the first thunder in the spring as very significant in the cycle, and the first snows. So yeah, I guess there's not exactly this kind of pinpoint date on the calendar like in a Western convention, but there's seasonal things that keep us going. But we do often use winter as counts for the year, as in terms of a person is so many winters old, or this happened this many winters ago. So this is from Terry Brocky of the Aani Nation, Fort Belknap. Good day. If we think awareness and understanding, I think it is important to focus on our traditional pathways of our heritage languages and how it expresses our worldview through each of our unique specific languages and cultures as unique tribes. What I speak of is what I've noticed within my learning pathway from our language and how it expresses our worldview. As a reference, Vine Deloria's Perspectives from God is Read, Chapter 4, as it is applicable for those who may not speak the language or have a limited view of traditional pathways due to acculturation. For example, I think some of the stuff we often acknowledge in today's traditional Indigenous culture, using a baseline of forced understanding, by a contract of Western culture, are vested in a westernized temporal system. If you think about it, the concept of a new year is a calendar moment. Speaking from my tribe's traditional pathways only, from what I understand from our Aani white clay culture, we do not traditionally recognize December 31st or January 1st of a New Year holiday. In fact, the concept of a holiday is foreign to our way of life. Sure, traditionally we have events that are paramount within our culture that may be compared to a holiday, the thunderbird returning in the spring, the first snow, or a ceremony that is dictated by an event usually recognized in spatially manner with the tribe's given environment. That event too can signify multiple things within our culture. But the White Clay Nation followed the moons, a lunar cycle. There are 13 moons in a lunar year. Why do we have a leap year? Why do we have 12 months? Because a temporal westernized calendar has to have an extra day every 4 years to make it work. For example, the full moon is on January 13th. We call this the moon when it is cold. That that is what we that is what we followed. I understand it. Specifically, it is cyclical, and that moon will return next year. A good example today is that we have replaced a few of our traditional moons and expressed them from a westernized thought in our language. For example, in a contemporary fashion, December this month, we call it the wintertime big holy moon. This is an adoption of a westernized temporal worldview. Because our language has only been written since around 1900, has been influenced by westernized thought. I would argue that we would adhere more to the traditional form of our relatives, the Arapaho, calling it the middle time winter moon. That adheres to more of our spatial worldview and has no influence from a westernized temporal culture. I would make inferences that this was our traditional name for December's full moon prior to contact, and since our tribes were one long ago. Do we have things we've adopted since this Western system of time was placed upon us? Yes, today there are things in our contemporary we have adapted to. For example, both the Ani and Nakoda each have a New Year song. There's been running for 100 years plus in Lodgepole, a powwow. Some ceremonies are dictated by the New Year. Throughout the year, we've adapted westernized holidays and expressed them in our language. But if we circle back to your comment of awareness and understanding, I think the paramount factor is to expose the learner to our traditional pathways, then teach of the influences of the system and how it affects and influences our contemporary worldview as an Indigenous person.
Heskahalt and Pausier. My name is Julie Jeffers. I am actually Little Shell, Assiniboine, but I studied language at SKC and just graduated this last spring. And of course, my mentor, Naomi Billadu, says absolutely use the language as much as possible. So I use my greeting in Salish. As a Little Shell member, it's tough because we don't have a lot of our traditions are lost, especially from where we're at in Montana, because the Anishinaabe, a lot of their stuff revolves around the rice season and then our maple season. And honestly, I can't tell you when their New Year is, but I know we have big celebrations when it's time for ricing and huge celebrations when we go out. Like a month in the summer and fall is where we make our huts for maple season. You know, there's one for the maple, there's one to sleep, and it's really neat. But we also have a really cool dance in February, and I don't want to say dance. It's a storytelling time. So we get together and everybody brings in a present and you put it down and you are gifted a present. And then throughout the next 3 days, you exchange presents. So you don't open it until you leave, and it's a constant exchanging. But then there's elders doing stories over here and kids everywhere listening and singing and dancing and just all the old stories. It's so much fun. And I finally got there a couple of years ago. So that's what I know. And it's so hard because those traditions have been lost because of being pushed this way so far. And the traditions in Canada straight above us, like in Saskatchewan, are even more different because of their cold colder weather, and there's a different ecological system up there.